My father stood at Aunt Ruth's dinner table, raised his glass, and said, "Kayla, what does it feel like to be a failure without a husband? Not quietly, not by accident, right there, in front of my mother, my brothers, their wives, and every child old enough to understand shame." Tyler laughed first. Brandon looked away. My mother stared at her napkin. I didn't beg. I didn't break. I set my fork down and said, "What does it feel like knowing this failure is done paying your bills? Before I tell you what happened next, tell me, what would you have done?" Before that night, I had spent my whole life trying to earn a seat at that table. My name is Kayla Bennett. I was 36, a regional finance director, the kind of woman people at work trusted with numbers that could make or break entire departments. I owned good coats, paid my taxes early, and kept my apartment so clean it almost looked unlived in. Men noticed me. Women complimented my hair. Strangers assumed I had it all together. But in my family, none of that mattered. To them, I was still the oldest daughter who had missed the only deadline that counted. No husband, no children, no smiling Christmas card with matching pajamas. At every gathering, my brother's kids ran through the living room while someone asked me, with syrupy concern, if I was still focusing on work. They said it softly, like my career was a medical condition. Aunt Ruth's house in Columbus always smelled like cinnamon, roasted chicken, and furniture polish, the kind of smell that tricks you into believing a family is safe. Her dining room had warm yellow lights, a long wooden table, and framed photos covering one wall. Baptisms, graduations, weddings, babies wrapped in hospital blankets. Every version of the Bennett family that made sense to people. I was in some of those pictures, too. But I always looked like a guest who had wandered into the frame. My father, Victor Bennett, loved that wall. He would stand beneath it with a drink in his hand and talk like he had built every life in those frames with his bare hands. He had been a contractor once, and he still carried himself like a man holding blueprints for everyone else's future. My mother, Linda, stayed near the kitchen, always folding napkins, wiping counters, checking the oven, touching things that did not need touching. She had a soft face and tired hands. When Victor's voice got sharp, her shoulders moved before the rest of her did. Like her body heard danger first. Then there were my brothers, Brandon, Tyler, and Evan, all married, all fathers, all experts at accepting help without remembering who gave it, especially when that help came from me. That night, I walked in wearing a dark blazer and cream blouse, pretty enough to be noticed, polished enough to be resented. Ruth squeezed my hand at the door a little too long. "I'm glad you came," she whispered. I should have asked why. Instead, I smiled, stepped inside, and took my usual seat near the edge of the table, where I always sat, 3 days before Aunt Ruth's dinner. Tyler called me at work. I knew he wanted money before he said hello. Tyler never called during business hours unless something was overdue or already denied by a bank. I was in my office with budget reports open when his name lit up my screen. "Kayla," he said. "Too bright. Big sister." "How's the finance queen?" I leaned back. "What do you need?" The silence on the line told the truth. He laughed once. "Can I check on you?" "You can. You just don't." That was when the charm thinned. He told me about a business idea, subscription boxes, handmade pet treats, matching collars, something his fiancée had seen online and decided was their ticket out of bills and rent. Then came the ask. "We just need you to co-sign. Around $50,000 with your credit. It's nothing. Nothing." That word sat in my ear like a fly. 50,000 was not nothing. It was my emergency fund, my peace of mind. But to Tyler, my money had never been money. It was a door he expected to open. "I'm not co-signing," I said. His voice dropped. "Wow. Tyler." "No, it's fine. I forgot. You don't have a family to worry about. Must be nice keeping everything for yourself." I stared at my desk until the numbers blurred. I said no. He hung up first. By the time I arrived at Aunt Ruth's house that evening, the insult was still under my skin. I felt it when Linda kissed my cheek and whispered, "Just ignore your father tonight." Okay, that should have warned me. Dinner started the way it always did. The children fought over roles. Brandon talked about mortgage rates like he understood them. Evan's wife passed around beach pictures. Nobody asked about my life. Nobody asked about my work. I was useful when bills were due. invisible when stories were told. Then Victor pushed back his chair. The scrape of wood against hardwood cut through the room. Aunt Ruth froze near the sideboard. My mother's hand tightened around her napkin. Victor lifted his bourbon glass. "I want to say something about my oldest," he said. My stomach went cold. He smiled at me, the kind of smile that had teeth in it. "Kayla," he said, loud enough for every cousin, wife, and child to hear. "What does it feel like to be a failure without a husband?" For 1 second, no one moved. Then Tyler laughed. Brandon looked down, but his shoulders shook. Evan covered his mouth with his fist. Someone's fork clicked against a plate. My mother stared at the cloth in her lap like it might swallow her. Heat rose behind my eyes, but I did not give him tears. I placed my fork down, slowly, carefully. Then I looked at my father. "What does it feel like?" I said. "Knowing this failure is done paying your bills." The laughter stopped so fast it felt like someone had slammed a door. Victor's glass hung in the air, and in that dead quiet, I stopped wanting their love and took back my life. I left before anyone remembered how to breathe. The front door closed behind me with a soft click. Louder than Victor's insult, cold air hit my face. It smelled like wet leaves and chimney smoke, the kind of Ohio night that makes every streetlight look lonely. I walked to my car without looking back. Inside, the seat was cold through my skirt. My hands rested on the wheel, perfectly still, while my heart beat hard against my ribs. Then the memories came. I was 15 again, standing in our kitchen with flour on my shoes from the bakery, sliding my little envelope of cash across the counter. The roof had been leaking over the hallway. Mom had been whispering to contractors like a woman negotiating with a storm. I had saved that money for a summer science program. I left it with a note that said, "For the roof." Nobody asked what I gave up. At 18, I chose the cheaper college because Victor refused to help with the paperwork for the school I wanted. He said girls with big dreams came home with debt and attitude. I smiled like it didn't hurt and worked every job I could find. At 26, Brandon lost his job. I paid his rent until he could get back on his feet. He never told his wife it was me. At 30, Evan wanted one perfect vacation for his kids. I covered the tickets and hotel. He posted pictures online and called it a blessing. And Linda, my mother, her prescriptions, her appointments, the bills she folded into tiny squares and hid under coupons because she didn't want Victor to see her fear. Then there was Victor himself. The car insurance, the utilities, the late notices, the quiet transfers, the mortgage payments that left my account every month while he stood under Aunt Ruth's family photos and called himself a provider. I drove home in silence. No music, no crying, just the hum of the road and one sentence repeating in my head. I am not their daughter. I am their emergency fund. By the time I reached my apartment, something inside me had gone cold in a clean way. Not numb. Clear. I kicked off my heels by the door, changed out of the cream blouse that still smelled like roasted chicken, and opened the locked drawer in my desk. Payments, bills, bank records, notes from old conversations, the agreement tied to the house. The one Victor begged me to keep quiet about when his debt almost swallowed everything nearly 10 years ago. Almost $200,000. That was the size of his secret. I spread the papers across my table until my apartment looked less like a home and more like a courtroom waiting. Then I found my attorney's card. I saw Linda's face at that table, staring down, trapped between fear and habit. Then I pressed call. When the attorney answered, my voice did not shake. "I'm ready," I said. And for the first time that night, I believed myself. Saturday morning came with a knock that did not ask permission. It hit my apartment door 3 times. I was already dressed. Dark pants, white sweater, hair pulled back. On the coffee table sat the folder. Victor's voice came through the door before I opened it. "Kayla, open up, now!" Tyler stood behind him when I pulled the door back, jaw tight, eyes red, still wearing that entitled lean. My father pushed inside. "You had your little performance," he snapped. "You embarrassed me. You upset your mother. Now you're going to fix it." I closed the door gently. That made him angrier. "You don't get to walk away from family because your feelings got hurt." Tyler pointed at the table. "Dad's bills are already bouncing." "Good," I said. Victor blinked. Excuse me, I said good. That means the boundary is working. His face darkened. Boundary, I am your father. No, I said. You are a grown man using that word like a credit card. Tyler stepped forward. Just restart the payments. We can discuss everything after everybody cools down. You mean after I feel guilty enough to pay again? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I sat on the couch, wanting them standing over the evidence like defendants who had not noticed the witness. Open the folder, I said. Victor laughed once. I don't have time for games. Then you should have saved time by telling the truth 10 years ago. His hand moved to the folder. He flipped it open fast. Then he stopped. The room changed. Tyler leaned closer. What is that? Payments, I said. Bills, mortgage records, insurance, utilities, medical expenses for Mom, and the agreement tied to the house. Tyler looked at him. What agreement? I kept my eyes on my father. Tell him. Victor swallowed. The man who could humiliate me in a dining room full of people suddenly could not speak in my living room, so I did it for him, almost 10 years ago. Dad had a debt close to $200,000. The house was days away from a crisis he could not talk his way out of. He asked me for help, not Brandon, not Evan, not you, me. Tyler's face went pale. Debt from what Victor snapped. That's not your business. It became my business when you let me pay for a house you kept calling yours. He turned on me. I was going to pay you back. When silence, after you mocked me for not having a husband, after you let your sons laugh while I kept your lights on, after Mom hid her bills because she was afraid of your pride. Victor's hand curled around the folder. Then he saw the attorney's letter beneath the payments, and the anger drained from his face. What is this? He whispered. That is notice, I said. From now on. Everything goes through my attorney. The house will be handled legally. The mortgage gets settled first. I recover what I paid, with reasonable interest. Anything left gets divided the way the law allows. No shouting, no guilt, no kitchen table deals. Tyler shook his head. You can't do that to Mom. I'm not doing anything to Mom. I'm offering her a choice, a safe place, a room in my apartment if she wants it. Victor laughed. Thin and ugly. She won't leave me. Maybe not. But this time, she gets to decide without your hand on her fear. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Good. The daughter he knew would have apologized by now. She would have cried, transferred the money, and spent the weekend hating herself. That daughter was gone. Victor picked up the folder with shaking fingers. You want to destroy your own family, I stood. No, I'm done funding the lie that destroyed us. For the first time in my life, my father looked smaller than me. I walked to the door and held it open. Leave, I said. Next time, call my attorney. Victor looked at the folder, then at me. His voice dropped to almost nothing. Kayla. I waited. There was no apology inside my name, only fear. So I closed the door before he could turn that into my problem too. My mother called that evening. I let the phone ring in my hand. Linda Bennett had a way of breaking my heart before she even spoke. I could picture her in that kitchen, standing under the buzzing light, one hand on the counter, the other pressed to her chest like she was holding herself together. Kayla, she said. Her voice was small. Mom, what did you do to your father? There it was, the old reflex. Protect Victor first, understand me later. I closed my eyes. I told the truth. He says you're trying to take the house. I'm trying to stop paying for a lie. She went quiet. I heard the refrigerator hum on her end, then a drawer closing softly. That house is all we have, she whispered. No, Mom, it's all he told you you had. She started to cry then, but not loudly. Linda never cried loudly. Even her pain had learned to keep its voice down. I told her about the spare room. I told her she could stay with me as long as she needed. No pressure, no conditions, just clean sheets, a locked door, and mornings where nobody slammed cabinets to punish her for breathing wrong. I can't leave him, she said. He has no one. He made sure of that. She hung up after that. Not angry, just tired, for 2 days. I heard nothing. Then, late Monday night, she called again. This time, her voice was different, flat, clear, like something inside her had finally cracked in the right direction. I asked him to apologize. She said, I told him you saved us. I told him he needed to admit it. I sat down on the edge of my bed, and he said this was my fault. Her breath trembled. He said, I raised you soft. He said, if I had been a better wife, you would have known your place. The room around me went still. Linda inhaled sharply. I don't think I want to know my place anymore. By Thursday, she came to my apartment with 2 suitcases, a box of old photographs, and the blue sweater she always wore when she was scared. She stood in my doorway like a guest asking permission to survive. I took the bags from her hands. You're home, I said. The legal process was not dramatic. That surprised me. No thunder, no courtroom shouting, just signatures, statements, phone calls, and my attorney's calm voice turning years of shame into clean language. The house was sold through the proper channels. The mortgage and obligations were settled first. I recovered what I had paid, with reasonable interest. The rest was handled by the attorney. Divided clearly, without one more family argument over a kitchen table. Victor moved into a small apartment across town. Aunt Ruth told me he hung the old family photos on the wall and still talked like people were waiting for his opinion. They weren't. Tyler sent me an apology by email, 3 lines of regret, followed by a paragraph about being short on cash. I deleted it. That was my revenge. Not cruelty, not ruin, just the end of access. 8 months later, my mother learned how to make bowls that leaned to one side. She loved them anyway. Our new apartment had morning light, a small balcony, and no footsteps that made her flinch. On Tuesdays, Linda went to pottery class. On Sundays, she baked cinnamon rolls because she wanted to, not because Victor expected a perfect house that smelled like forgiveness. One evening, we opened the box of old photos. The same family wall that used to make me feel erased was spread across my living room floor. Weddings, babies, Christmas mornings, smiles that looked real until you remembered what was said after the camera clicked. Mom picked up one picture of me at 16, standing in front of our old house. You looked so tired, she whispered. I was. I said. She touched the edge of the photo. I'm sorry I didn't see it. For a long time, that apology was all I had ever wanted. I kept one picture, not because it proved we were happy, but because it proved I survived. Family love is not a payment plan. Being single is not failure. And loyalty does not mean letting people drain you dry while they laugh at your pain. If you've ever had to protect yourself from your own family, share your story in the comments. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.